Well, thank you everybody for joining us for today's Medical Alley webinar, again with Mayo Clinic Ventures and Corporate Development. My name is Ben Wagner. I'm with Medical Alley. Happy to be with you today. Before we introduce our two experts with us, just a couple of quick notes for this webinar. Today's discussion is being recorded, so you'll receive a link as you've registered after the discussion is over with. So if you'd like to rewatch or send to a colleague, we'd encourage you to do that. This webinar is part of Medical Alley Start's ongoing efforts to promote collaboration and innovation. This conversation really is part of a series on corporate development featuring insights on deal making and industry trends from the leaders really at the center of healthcare transformation. So with us today is Muddassir Laique with Mayo Clinic Corporate Development, as well as Seth Eisenman with Mayo Clinic Ventures. Both of them will provide an overview of Mayo Clinic's innovation and commercialization engine, its collaboration model, and some foundational investment principles. So Seth and Muddassir will begin their remarks about Mayo Clinic Ventures and corporate development, how they really work in tandem with industry collaborators to transform healthcare by fostering innovative ideas, catalyzing bold initiatives, and really advancing cutting-edge solutions to address unmet patient needs. So afterwards, after they finish their remarks, we'll have just a couple of minutes for questions. If you have a question, there's a Q&A function to put that in there, and we'll make sure to put them to our panelists at the end of their remarks. So with that, Seth, Muddassir, thank you both so much for being with us here and taking the time today. Seth, I'll begin and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ben. Really appreciate that. So first, would like to extend my appreciation on behalf of Muddassir as well to the Medical Alley team for allowing us to present this webinar today. Mayo Clinic has been a member of Medical Alley for many years, and the community and innovation community that has brought together transformative innovations, industry leaders, startup companies, entrepreneurs, and investors to really transform healthcare has really aligned perfectly with Mayo Clinic's mission of the needs of the patient come first. So we would like to tell a little bit of a story about the history of innovation at Mayo Clinic, what our innovation ecosystem looks like, the involvement of business development at the central interface of that with industry, as well as some potential opportunities that Muddassir will go through in terms of investments and how we look at investment principles and opportunities to strategically invest in our collaborators. So to begin, Mayo Clinic has a 150-year history of innovation. This really started when the Mayo brothers invited non-Mayo physicians into their practice to create an integrated multi-specialty practice, which was never really done at that time in the late 1800s. Here's a snapshot of a few different innovative things that have come out of Mayo Clinic over the last century. So in 1905, Dr. Wilson was the first to create the frozen section. This allowed for pathology and real-time decision-making within the intraoperative procedure to have real-time decision-making in the betterment of the outcome of patient outcomes. In the present day, this is a strategic initiative of Mayo Clinic to automate and digitize the entire anatomic pathology journey. And we are collaborating with a number of external industry partners to bring in external innovations as well as to innovate in this space to really streamline the entire anatomic pathology journey. The second column highlights Dr. Plummer, who was the first one to start to track longitudinally patient medical records. This is the dawn of what now is the electronic health record. If we look at today and how Mayo Clinic is innovating in this, we've taken and expertly de-identified the entire longitudinal data set that Mayo Clinic has from millions of patient records. And this is now housed within Mayo Clinic Platform. Mayo Clinic Platform was stood up by business development about 4.5 years ago. And they now currently have products and engage with industry to really discover, validate, and implement novel, personalized, and predictive digital health solutions to really optimize patient care. In the third column, Dr. Kendall and Dr. Hench discovered cortisone in the 1950s and were awarded the Nobel Prize. This was done in collaboration with Merck & Co., who patented cortisone. and commercialize that. That affected a number of patients, as derivatives of cortisone are still used in clinical practice today. If we look at the present day, Mayo Clinic Ventures and business development collaborate with biopharma in new novel therapeutics, especially in rare disease and cell and gene therapies. In the last column, Dr. Kirkland was involved in an early collaboration to create the Mayo Gibbon heart-lung machine with an external collaborator. This enabled essentially more invasive surgical techniques to be performed that were not available prior to that innovation. And today, Mayo Clinic continues to revolutionize in the surgical space, creating more minimally invasive procedures by pairing augmented reality and surgical navigation. So this history of innovation is at the root culture of Mayo Clinic. And this is where Mayo Clinic's business development office now plays a crucial role in innovation and working with external collaborators. So our mission at business development is to collaborate and deliver strategic, innovative, and mission-advancing solutions for the benefit of patients worldwide. The key task here is that we are looking to diversify revenue streams back to Mayo Clinic to augment and supplement our clinical practice in an ever-challenging reimbursement model and a very slim margin business. This is also a way of us innovating and creating products and services that have a global impact outside of just our brick and mortar practice. So while we have one mission, there are two teams within business development. So on the left is Mayo Clinic Ventures, which was established in 1985. This is the commercialization arm, which was set up after the Bayh-Dole Act was put in place, which was a result of the federal government wanting commercial activities or commercial economic development from federal funding. Within Mayo Clinic Ventures, we have about 100 individuals, that it's a multidisciplinary team with MBAs, MDs, PhDs, JDs, a cross-functional team which does licensing, technology development, and a patenting function. We're looking at taking innovations in Mayo Clinic out into the marketplace through startup formations, licensing activities with existing companies, and we also have a venture investing function, which Muddassir will speak to more later. On the corporate development side, they're much more focused on institutional strategic priorities. So working with our practice departments and our research shield and the business units within Mayo Clinic, how can they optimize and expand their business? And they're looking at external innovations and capabilities and to bring those in through mergers and acquisitions, partnerships, and strategic collaborations. Now, the activities of both of these teams within business development are rooted in Mayo Clinic's 2030 strategy of Cure, Connect, and Transform. So Cure is looking at discovering and delivering novel diagnostics and therapies and cures. Connect is really around the digital care delivery capabilities, but keeping a human touch to expand our reach, especially in underserved populations and rural communities. And then Transform is using the insights and knowledge gained from Mayo Clinic data to really develop sort of new digital healthcare solutions that have a global impact. Now, business development is considered the front door for external collaborations to access Mayo Clinic innovations. Now, within Mayo Clinic, we have quite a diverse ecosystem of stakeholders, all centered around the research, education, and practice shields with the mission that the Mayo Clinic, or sorry, the patient comes first. There's a number of groups that are involved in sort of education around innovation, helping protect intellectual property, and providing the resources to do technology development internally. And then those things are then routed through business development, where we then network with our external industry collaborators to set up strategic collaborations to commercialize those innovations. And we also network quite heavily with venture capitalists and private equity firms to set up investor syndicates to obviously support startup companies and companies that Mayo Clinic Innovations have been licensed into. Now, to look a little bit more closely at the business model and how business development works, you can look at this, and this is a really good slide that kind of summarizes all the different aspects. But on the left-hand side, We are looking at our practice and research fields to determine what innovations are needed. So research in early phase discovery, maybe finding new molecules or new targets. And then a practice that's really at the bedside of the patient, seeing what patient needs are unmet, where areas of innovation need to occur. So we work with them and then through internal funds and resources to essentially start the development pathway for these innovations. And we assist in that process through patenting, protecting intellectual property. And then through Mayo Clinic Ventures, we work through an inside-out model where we take that intellectual property and we work with our external collaborators to license that Mayo Clinic intellectual property or to do startup formation. Another aspect that we do is that if an external group has a product in development, we can pair them with Mayo experts to fill gaps in sort of maybe the product development knowledge or the clinical knowledge to incorporate that into clinical workflows or how or potential clinical regulatory approval or writing clinical protocols and such. We call those know-how license agreements, where essentially we give access to our experts for those sorts of activities. Now, on the corporate development side, they're really looking, again, at that strategic priorities of the institution, and then how can we bring in an outside-in model of sourcing new capabilities, working with strategic partners with the opportunity of investing in those to diversify the upside. That brings in new capabilities into Mayo Clinic, which is satisfying the needs of our practice and business units for the benefit of patients. Now, we do have the ecosystem and the business model, which has been optimized over the years to be very efficient. But at the heart of this is really the innovation culture that exists within Mayo Clinic that expands that 150-year timeline. So this quote from Charlie Mayo, I think, encapsulates this quite well, that if we excel in anything, it is in our capacity for translating idealism into action. So this is Charlie Mayo, one of the founding members of Mayo Clinic. And I think innovation is a guiding principle, part of our rich ties here at Mayo Clinic that permeates the culture here, that our 72,000 member staff really has the mindset that if there is a problem or an opportunity, and they have that idealistic mindset, that we do innovate around those problems. Now, our staff has been very successful in innovating, and that's led to Mayo Clinic Ventures also being successful through commercializing intellectual property. So Mayo Clinic has licensed technology in every continent in the world, and the most important aspect of this is that millions of lives have been touched from Mayo Clinic licensed innovation. Now, if we double click on this and take a little bit closer look at what Mayo Clinic Ventures has done over the years, in our 40-year history, as you can imagine, with 72 to 76,000 employees at Mayo Clinic, which, those roles cross clinical specialties as well as basic research across all areas. There's a rich, diverse amount of intellectual property that's being developed across biopharma therapeutics, around medtech devices, around digital solutions, and then a suite of research tools that can be used for research and development outside the walls of Mayo Clinic. In our 40-year history, we've had more than 7,000 inventors at Mayo Clinic, which of all of those have submitted more than 11,000 technologies at this point. And then Mayo Clinic has turned those technologies and innovations into more than 350 startups formed based on that Mayo Clinic intellectual property. And then of the nearly 11,000 technologies, we've licensed or optioned more than 4,000 of those, showing the success rate of our office in converting those innovations into commercial relationships with the potential of impacting patients. Now, on the right-hand side is the most impactful part of this slide, is that millions of lives have been impacted by Mayo Clinic innovations. And then as a metric of that success and that impact, over $1.1 billion of revenue have been brought back through equity, through exits, milestone payments, and royalties on those products and services that Mayo Clinic Innovations have contributed to. This money has now been reinvested back into research and patient care to continue to support the Mayo Clinic's mission. And based on our business model, where we're heavy on royalties, even if we were to not engage in any additional collaborations, as the products that we've already engaged industry with hit the market, our revenue will continue to grow in this area based on those royalties downstream. Now, to take a little bit more of an objective look at the metrics, this is in comparison to some of our colleagues that are medical, medical institutions across the U.S. We by far lead in the number of disclosures that are submitted to Mayo Clinic Ventures, with 500 to 600 on an annual basis. We have 432 license agreements that are generating revenue on a yearly basis. And then we average about 12 new startup companies that are based on Mayo Clinic intellectual property. Now, the Heartland Forward, which is an institution that looks at economic development and impact, has rated Mayo Clinic as the #1 U.S. hospital or research institution for commercializing new technologies, which reflects the professionalization of business development and Mayo Clinic Ventures in translating innovations into products and services. Now, I've set the stage for the innovative culture at Mayo Clinic, as well as the ecosystem that we have and the model by which business development collaborates with industry. But at the heart of it is really, all the legal contracts that are necessary to set the financial and non-financial terms of those relationships. So this is where, in my opinion, business development at Mayo Clinic far exceeds our colleagues in this area, because we have the ability to cross-functionally work with our stakeholders internally and align all the areas of obligations and commitments with our external collaborators in a very seamless process that's expedited. So on the far left, this would be your sort of standard commercial license agreement where we're granting rights to commercialize intellectual property. If we don't have a specific product in mind, we can do co-development agreements where we lay out ownership of intellectual property and commercial rights. We do startup companies where if Mayo Clinic if Mayo Clinic staff want to be founders in companies, there's a pathway for them to take out Mayo Clinic intellectual property in a NewCo. They can work with external entrepreneurs and investors in bringing that up. And then I think importantly on the far right that highlights my initial point is that if there's a need for sponsored research from companies after the license agreements are in place, we work with our legal contract groups to ensure that the agreements are tied together, so there's freedom to operate on any foreground IP developed under those research agreements. And then also, if there's external intellectual property, say from another university, we take the lead in having interinstitutional agreements in place so that our industry collaborators only have to work with Mayo Clinic and they get the full rights granted for that intellectual property that may be co-owned with another institution. So this is really to set up a sort of a suite of alignment with our internal stakeholders, with our industry partners to streamline the entire process of commercialization. Now, with that entire framework and business model set up, here's a snapshot of some of our success to date. So on the left-hand side is Mayo Clinic Ventures. So this would be where foundational intellectual property has been licensed into these companies. Two to note that are based in Rochester and are startup companies where Mayo employees have taken intellectual property out and have been founders is Viriad and Rion. Viriad is in the oncolytic virus space. They have phase 2 clinical trials ongoing right now, and they have partnered with Regeneron. And then Rion is looking at exosome technology and various indications, as well as for drug delivery. Pink DX is one that I would highlight that we just recently did that's focused on women's health for endometrial and ovarian cancer. We've entered into agreements with them, and we're also investors. And Bonnie Anderson, who's a serial entrepreneur in the diagnostic space, has just closed on a $40 million Series A, where Mayo Clinic was a participant in that syndicate. And then the last thing I would mention would be Exact Sciences. So I'm sure everyone has seen commercials on TV for Cologuard, where they use fecal samples to essentially do colorectal screening, avoiding invasive colonoscopies that a lot of people don't want to do, has at this point impacted and saved millions of, or sorry, not millions, but has impacted patients and has been used in millions of patients. The foundational intellectual property of Cologuard was developed at Mayo Clinic, and we continue to have collaborations with Exact Sciences on those developments. So here I will stop and I will hand it over to Muddassir to talk about corporate development and then some of our investment funds that we have.
Thank you so much, Seth, and thank you to the Medical Alley team. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to meet you. My name is Muddassir Laique. I'm in corporate development, And you're probably wondering what that means. We'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But just following on from Seth, I want to highlight a few successes on the other side of this Venn diagram. So I'll talk about three over here, and obviously there's a lot to talk about, but I apologize. So one that I'll pick right here is Muddassir. So this is a collaboration that was with a hospital in Mexico. Muddassir is based out of Mexico, and what we really focused on was oncology. And the idea here really was to develop a crucial area for advancing patient care in oncology. And what we wanted to do was help them establish what would have been what is working towards a center of excellence for their oncology practice. Let's take another one here, medically home. The idea here was to integrate subacute care into a home model, which essentially ensures patients receive high quality care, but at the comfort of their home. And another significant one that I'll point out is resilience. So this allowed us to have dynamic biomanufacturing that was tailored to some of our key organizational priorities. So ensuring we meet the demands of our patients and partners. So the idea here really is to give you a flavor of everything from international to domestic health provision and biomanufacturing as well. And each one here has a story behind it, but just some of the ways that we collaborate at the corporate development. So the primary goal of corporate development is to advance Mayo Clinic's strategic priorities across the three shields, so practice, education, and research. And this alignment is crucial to achieving our 2030 strategy that Seth brought up, which is cure, connect, and transform. And there's a fourth one now, unbound. And the idea really there is to take digital and physical and combine them together. Our teams are strategically focused within specific business divisions of Mayo Clinic. So what you'll see here are four circles. The first one is related to Mayo Clinic platform that Seth talked about before. We call it just platform. Second one is for Mayo Clinic International, labeled international here. Mayo Collaborative Services, otherwise known as our labs business. And then high value opportunities that focuses in areas such as practice and Gen AI. Each division has its own unique strategy, and our objective in corporate development is to apply these strategies to develop productive and fruitful relationships and collaborations with our partners. So, for example, in the previous slide, we discussed Muddassir. This initiative aligned with Mayo Clinic International strategic intent to deliver the Mayo model of care to our international markets, addressing the local healthcare challenge, while being able to bring our standard operating protocols, procedures, and our way of doing things. So it's not only bridging that gap in terms of how we do it, but how would we do it if we were in country. Similarly, within our labs division, let's take another example. One of our strategic goals is to continuously advance our test menu with novel diagnostics. This not only solves significant problems in the market, but also helps us sustain and enhance our leading position. So let's think, for example, precision oncology, precision medicine, some wide spaces, but very interesting technologies that are being developed over there. So how can we partner on that side? I hope some of this understanding in terms of corporate development, the areas that we're focused in on, gives you some idea. And hopefully on the next slide, it will give you a better sense how we finance some of these strategic collaborations. Yep. So we have several investment programs broadly categorized into three categories. You'll see Mayo Clinic Ventures, Corporate Development, and Treasury Services. MCV manages three funds, each dedicated to different risk profiles and investment thesis for the companies. These funds are crucial for fostering and supporting early stage ventures that's aligned with our strategic priorities. In corporate development, we have one primary fund that supports strategic collaborations and initiatives. The purpose of the fund is to play really a pivotal role in advancing the partnership and ensuring that we can support the innovative projects that align with our goals. And then lastly, the Treasury, within their venture capital asset class, manages the Venture Investment Fund, whose primary objective is to achieve financial returns from Mayo. And this fund is more of a traditional investment return, which complements some of our strategic investment portfolios, the ones in MCV, Mayo Clinic Ventures, and corporate development. Now, you're probably wondering, is it possible to do one only, or can we do both? So the short answer is that it is possible to do both, but the opportunity has to be right and the timing of it has to be right. What I would take away from here is that MCV and Corp Dev funding programs are really geared around establishing the strategic relationship. And that really opens up the path then towards making those potential investments. So some foundational principles in terms of how we think about things, right? So if you're considering working with Mayo Clinic, there are a few important points to keep in mind. Firstly, for us to consider something, and you may hear me say this a few times, is that we really favor having a strategic relationship in place. So that could be the likes of a know-how agreement or a joint development agreement. Actually, Seth, would it be possible if you can go back those few slides with the pathways, just to kind of reinforce what we're talking about here?
This one?
This one right here, yep. And so when we think about the strategic collaborations, you can think about perhaps this diagram a little bit more, and probably a little bit more to the left side of this. So if you think about it, what are strategic collaborations? Some of them could be in the form of license agreement, co-development agreements. And so that's kind of how to think through about what strategic collaborations could look like. And of course, if you're coming on the lab side, then it could mean in terms of commercialization as well too. So this is just a flavor in terms of what strategic collaboration means to us. So the next one is that generally we invest from C to Series B. That's the general rule of thumb. We can invest outside of Series B, but it's on a case-by-case basis, and it tends to be if we're following on investment. And then finally, while we don't lead investments, we do like to participate in strong syndicate rounds. And the whole idea there is that we want to ensure that there's a robust support system for ventures we back. So strategic investments enable us at Mayo to be incentivized and aligned with the company's outcomes, and it allows us to also participate in the growth of the company and along with the market exposure. Now let's, I guess, ask the question, how do we navigate through Mayo Clinic? And there's probably many ways we can do this. Here's probably one path out of many. So let's start by identifying first, where does your innovation fit within Mayo Clinic's ecosystem? So we have three shields. You've heard it many times: practice, education, research. And alongside these, we have labs, Mayo Collaborative Services, and platform, which is Mayo Clinic Platform. So combined, these are our most important assets and capabilities. So then ask yourself the question, where does your innovation lie within these areas? And it could be one or it could be two. So for example, if you're coming with a diagnostic device, it could probably be more lab central, versus where you have a diagnostic device and some data components, it could be within two areas. So you can be coming to Mayo Collaborative Services, our labs, and Mayo Clinic Platform. So that is a possibility. Next, it's important to understand who would be interested in your value proposition. So I encourage everyone to use Google to your benefit. We have a strong online presence, and so it could be beneficial to look for experts that specialize in your niche, such as test development, prototype devices, or data utilization. See who would be interested and help identify who those individuals would be. And then finally, I would say probably one of the most important is connect with us early, right? So engage with folks like Seth and myself and help us establish a sustainable relationship that can ensure we have the right backing from the stakeholders. What we probably don't prefer is when relationships are established outside of our purview, because they're brought to us later and there's a lot of catch-up to play. The idea is really for us all to work together. And the key here is to provide you a simple framework of how you can navigate within Mayo Clinic to align your innovation with some of our strategic goals. I think we're almost done. Let's move to the next slide here. Okay. So what you will notice is that we've shown C to Series B here, which is based on our investment principles. The first two columns are pretty traditional asks of venture capital. And I think probably the third column here would be just questions that we thought would be more pertinent to us in terms of how we think about each round of financing and questions that we think about. But really, it all really comes down to a few things, right? How is the management team? What's the value proposition? And what is the moat of the innovation? Those are critical questions. And then as we continue to go from one financing round to another, we look for how is market penetration taking place? How is the financing, the funding? How is the support from other investors at the cap table, et cetera? So typical questions that a VC would also be interested in answering. The latter two columns are really where I think the idea is to connect the dots over here. So what's interesting and is a good takeaway is that it doesn't matter what financing round you're in. It's possible to establish a strategic collaboration in any one of these. But I would say with this caveat, it's probably typical that there are some sweet spots related to certain types of development. So for example, pre-product development for joint development type of programs, or know-how for areas that require to advance or take your innovation to the next level. And so it's important to note that outside even the investment aspect, the strategic collaborations also have their own economic terms. And so, for example, that could be the likes of upfront fees, royalties, equity, or combination of such. And then the last column here just roughly identifies which investment programs would fit into these type of rounds. And so you have MCB Corp Dev in the early parts, and then you have Treasury coming in later. And that's typical to how we operate. And then last slide, please. Perfect. And then bringing it back home, you saw this slide before. We'll end with this slide here as well. As we think about it, it starts with the three shields, labs, and platform, and as areas for strategic collaboration through Mayo Clinic Ventures as mechanisms for commercialization. We move to corporate development once these relationships are established and potentially expand on the collaboration through other areas of Mayo Clinic and or strategic investments that we talked about before, backed by different funding programs that we identified based on our investment principles. The goal is not only to help solve problems at Mayo, but to solve problems for the market at large, and with one mission in mind, to improve the lives of patients worldwide. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Muddassir, Seth, thank you so much for that presentation. We do want to open it up now to questions. And we've got a couple in the Q&A function, but if you've got one, if you've been listening or waiting to drop that in, if you click on those three dots, you should be able to access the Q&A function, put your question in, and then we can get them to our experts here today. I think we've got a good one to start off with here for both of you. How do you prioritize external partnership, collaborative, or licensing opportunities?
So I can speak to that one. I think if there's ever any opportunity to address an unmet patient need, that is a priority for us. Now, obviously, there's different levels of those priorities based on the amount of intellectual property that would be involved for Mayo Clinic, as well as some things involved with the company that we might be engaging with in terms of successful track record, makeup of management, potential investor syndicates that are involved. I would say we try to prioritize everything, but obviously volume is high for us. So we start at the top of the most transformational innovations that we have and work our way down from there. But we're doing, within Mayo Clinic Ventures, we're doing between 150 and 180 license agreements a year. So we're quite high volume, and we've expanded our office, essentially doubled in volume in employees over the last about 3 to 4 years to keep up with the high demand of these sorts of collaborations.
Excellent. Another question here about the clinical research cooperation. The person asking the question here has developed an at-home ovulation testing device with no need for refills or using one saliva drop, and they're looking to expand testing now and looking for a clinical research partner. They're asking, what should be the entry point?
So that's a good one. More specifics would be needed in terms of exactly what they're looking for. If they're looking for any aspect of product development with their product or clinical trial design, where we might help them design a clinical trial to do this research, we would consider that an intellectual property engagement with Mayo Clinic, and therefore a license agreement would be required. Now, just to set the expectations of what a license agreement would look like is that there's some level of upfront consideration, potential milestones, and royalties on those products for engaging with Mayo Clinic in those activities. Now, if it's much more pure that you just want to do research study and you want a principal investigator to run that study, our legal contract administration office would essentially handle that contracting. But you would still need to identify and engage with a clinical research expert at Mayo to act as the PI for that study. If there's questions around this, more for the former, where you're looking for some level of intellectual property, the easiest way to submit requests to our office is probably going to our website. So you can search Business Development Mayo Clinic. There will be a contact link at the top, and you can submit either in an intake form, or there's a there's an email address there for our general intake intake form. Through there, we essentially, across our multi-specialty team will expedite that response and get back to you.
A lot of really good questions coming in here now. Next is, what's the best way for a growth stage investor, Series B or later, to engage with Mayo?
Sure, I'll take that one. The best way to engage with us would be to connect with corporate development. As mentioned earlier, our foundational principles in terms of investment from a corporate point of view are up to Series B. But if there's an investor that's also interested in participating, what sounds to be potential areas of co-investment within our portfolio, that's something that we could look at with them, and we could potentially even connect them to our treasury program as well too, depending on what their area of strategic focus is. So for example, if it's within digital tech, we can take a look at that portfolio of assets that we have. If it's within labs, we can take a look at that portfolio of assets, et cetera. And so it's really about starting with corporate development. We take a look at our portfolio. From our portfolio, we can determine if there's a good fit from a growth investor point of view. And then from there, we can also bridge over to treasury if that continues to be a good collaborative discussion.
Exact Sciences was highlighted as a success story. The question here is really, what others would you point to, including medtech and others that are reaching the impact and kind of returns demanded at venture scale?
I think the best way to maybe see some of those is actually we announced collaborations on our LinkedIn page for Mayo Clinic Ventures. That's a good way of keeping track of some of the activities that we're doing in terms of collaboration. As I said, we're doing more than 150 sometimes license agreements a year, so the volume of license agreements is quite high. We have a number of strategic collaborations, like we do work with Boston Scientific on a few things that we've rolled out startup companies around based on sort of co-developed intellectual property. So there's a handful, but I think looking at our LinkedIn and press releases would be the best way to sort of capture that all-encompassing view of that.
And Seth, you touched on this a bit earlier, but maybe a finer point is, question from Mark here is, do you focus more on innovations that can impact a larger patient group, or those that focus more on niche problems?
It's both. We actually stood up a company that was based on a therapeutic for an ultra rare disease of as a congenital glycosylation disease, which there's only a few hundred of these patients in the world. So ultra rare diseases like that, where the patient populations are quite small and underserved, we are looking for innovations around that, and we'll stand up companies to solve those problems.
Great.
And I'll take the other side of that, Ben, if you don't mind as well too.
Yeah.
So if we think about Mayo Collaborative Services, our commercialization arm for labs and diagnostics, it could potentially be something more at scale. And what we're really trying to do is bring advanced diagnostics to the market. And so if there's a partner out there that's looking to have their novel therapy have a way of being commercialized, MCS is always an option to explore, and we're always interested in having those conversations. And so if it's larger population that the diagnostic is solving for, we're happy to take a look at that.
David is asking, what factors come into play when determining whether a company is a better acquisition target versus an investment?
Sure. I'll shoot from the hip here on the first one, Seth. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I haven't seen anything that we've acquired. Acquisitions are far and few, at least from the time that I've been. Coming back from the investment principle point of view, we generally prefer to be minority investors. There's probably a handful of investments that are considered strategic investments where we still continue to technically be a minority investor, but with a significant position on the cap table. The alignment on that side really falls under how it falls within the strategic priority of the business division. So if you think about, for example, Mayo Collaborative Services, how important does this business align with the strategic goals? How much of it can be a pillar? What does the future look like? What does the current look like right now for the company versus the future? What's in the pipeline? And so those could be certain areas for us to think about. The other that I would also put out is that there's always an opportunity to take a look at companies that are also in the distressed space as well too. And that really depends on where it fits within our strategic intent and what type of assets the company has remaining. So for example, if we think about, again, I'll come to the lab side of it, if there is a company that has assets that could potentially be considered valuable from an MCS point of view, that's something that we could take a look at. And from a technical point of view, it could be an acquisition, it could be a carve out, it could be even to a certain degree a partnership. So all options are on the table, but from my experience, acquisitions are far and few. So I think of it more as collaborations and minority investments.
Going back to that, I believe the Venn diagram of both of the arms here too. So Google was included in a couple of slides. Question is, can you speak to the relationship with Google or other big tech companies, Oracle, Cerner, Boston Sci, the like, and others from a collaboration standpoint?
So some of these things, depending on the confidentiality terms and such, like you'd be a little careful on exactly. A lot of this is out in the public domain in terms of press releases, but with the Google, it was really around their data security. So it's some of those bigger tech company relationships around using and leveraging their capabilities to enable Mayo Clinic and our priorities internal.
Excellent. Christian, with a nice note for both Seth and Muddassir, grateful for a fantastic presentation. Question is, do you have any recommendations about what their company can do to optimally prepare to request or apply for an introductory meeting with your team? And then when they do secure that meeting, how might they best prepare for that eventuality?
I can speak to this, Muddassir, if you have anything to add on your side. I would say on the intake form, be as sort of detailed in terms of what your interests are, in terms of, are you looking to in-license new assets into your pipeline? Do you have a product in development that you're looking for expertise on? Are you looking for investment? I would highlight what Muddassir said, is that any investment is contingent on some collaboration, whether it's through licensing intellectual property or co-development or joint development agreements. So if it's just investment, like we're handcuffed and we can't participate in investments in groups that we don't have that strategic collaboration relationship with. So I would say just be as detailed and submit the intake form, and we'll triage it to the right group to respond. In terms of the actual meeting, overview decks, similar things that you can give to an investor, just highlighting your technology and your interest would be super helpful.
Eric says that they have a licensing agreement with Mayo Clinic Ventures, but have lost their key contact. What would be the best way? What advice you would give to reconnect?
So you can reach through the business contact email on our website, or mayoclinicventures@mayo.edu, and that will come directly to Mayo Clinic Ventures. But yeah, reach out to us, because that's obviously an important relationship and we want to re-engage with you on that.
Jeffrey's got a question about where does patient engagement in the home fit into your investment system?
I'm not exactly sure what that means. If he can drop in another question just to clarify what patient engagement at home means.
Sure. Muddassir, I wonder, would medically home fit into that a little bit? So sort of virtual care. I don't know. Yeah. But essentially, that goes a little bit with the connect part of the 2030 strategy of delivering care virtually to patients with a human touch, and how we can take things that are higher on the complex care acuity, essentially taking them out of the hospital setting and giving and delivering care in a safe and effective way in a patient's home. So that is a priority for Mayo Clinic, and we've engaged with Medically Home as a partner to enable that. So kind of guessing on that question, but I think that's in alignment there.
I'll take it.
That's other priorities here too. Question is about the overall strategy at Mayo Clinic on mental health in general and precision medicine for ADHD in particular.
So for that one, I know our Center for Individualized Medicine is looking at sort of novel diagnostics and potential therapeutics in the mental health space, with a number of mental health diseases and disorders. So there's research at Mayo Clinic going, but I don't know enough from that question to maybe expand upon that answer. But definitely all areas of patient needs are a priority for Mayo.
Question from Matt. Of the pathways to commercialization, what volume of startup companies does Mayo target to support? And then additionally, is there a group within Mayo focused on building or managing a network of contract manufacturers to support startups?
I would say based on metrics, we roll out about 12 new startup companies based on Mayo Clinic intellectual property. We try to support them. So we actively engage with our startups by sitting on, boards, helping to introduce them to our investor networks, kind of provide that full network of support, whether we're an investor or not in that company. So whenever there's intellectual property involved in those startup companies, we try to support them the best we can. I forget. So Ben, what was the last part of that question?
Let me get back to just 1 second. It was, is there a group within Mayo focused on building or managing a network of contract manufacturers to support startups? For example, to support speed of connecting startups to industry experts?
That we do not. I'm not aware of anything there. Muddassir, I don't know if you have.
Yeah, so to a certain degree, yes. So for example, we have the Innovation Exchange out of Florida. We have our accelerators in ASU, and then we have our accelerator from Mayo Clinic platform as well too. So these are areas that are obviously meant for participants of that program to accelerate their growth, to be not only connected within the walls of Mayo Clinic and to access the resources, but also with industry as well. So those are options that are available. The other part I would also add to, just coming back off of Seth as well, is that when we think about collaborations, right? So you have a collaboration in place, it's meant to be a win-win. And so as we think about it, once those collaborations are in place or there's a strategic investment in place, we want to make a successful venture out of it. And so our best attempt, if there is not even a formal path of having created, we will do our best to draw those connections internally and try to develop, what could be an internal ecosystem if we need to, of the right experts to make sure that we deliver the advice or provide the advice that's needed to help the company get to that next stage. So that, I think, is a key differentiator of Mayo Clinic, right? It's not only just doing the strategic collaboration, it's also having the significant assets and capabilities, the amazing amount of science, research, knowledge of all of our physicians, researchers, academics that can help be the subject matter experts in specific areas of our collaborations.
A couple of questions about relationship to Mayo Clinic platform, and I believe one of you may have touched on this, but I'll maybe ask it again to reiterate. How does Mayo Clinic Ventures and corporate development work together with Mayo Clinic platform?
I'll take the corporate development side of it. The way that we really think about it, so again, it comes from a strategic collaboration point of view. So if you think about the path, and I'll spell it out very simply, and Seth, feel free to kick me under the table if I do this wrong, but the idea really here is, it doesn't matter what part of Mayo Clinic you're in, right? So think about it like strategic collaboration in place, post-strategic collaboration, then we consider a strategic investment. They can technically even happen in parallel. That's not an issue. But the idea really here is for us to be engaged and be able to bring our subject matter experts to the table and talk about how we would do things and what our problems we're trying to solve. And the idea is that we are a sub-market itself, right? And our problem can be extrapolated to the market. And if not, we are also looking at the market as a problem to solve. So it starts from a strategic collaboration, then works towards a strategic investment.
I would say just in general on Mayo Clinic platform and maybe AI digital solutions that people may have, the best way would be to go to they actually have their own external facing website that highlights their Accelerate program, which I believe is a 30-year program that really helps them get ready for market implementation. They also have Discover, Validate, and Connect, I think, are the three products, of which if you're looking for sort of an objective assessment of your AI models' abilities and assessments and the diversity of data sets, they have a product where you can run your AI model on de-identified Mayo Clinic data to essentially get that objective assessment. So Mayo Clinic platform has their website. That would be a good starting point. If you don't get exact alignment there, you can reach through the intake form at business development to start that process.
And have we shared, Ben, the link to business development's website?
I believe it was in the chat. I think Jeanette may have shared the business development contact page in the Q&A function. And then also, when we send the link to this recording after to all of our attendees, I think we can include that contact link since it seems like that was a popular request. So we'll include that in follow-up emails. There was the first question that was asked, and I don't want to skip past it, was, does Mayo Clinic Ventures and Corporate Development offer any internship opportunities for MBA students?
So not directly. We used to have the Mayo Innovation Scholars Program, which was in collaboration with the private schools within Minnesota, which is part of the MIAC conference, is how I reference. But they used to have undergraduates paired with a MBA candidate at those universities and bring them in and essentially do an innovation program around that. That's about a 6-month program. That's been discontinued at this point, but at some point, I think we will pick that back up, hopefully. But there's no direct internship opportunities right now.
There's a question here from Chris. How can banks collaborate with Mayo Clinic's business development to provide financing and deposit accounts for medical device companies, if at all?
I'm not sure about the latter part of it, but definitely the way that we can interact is to learn a little bit more about how are some of the banks looking at some of the capital market activities in some of our strategic areas. That's always a good collaboration that we have with some of the banks to talk through generally the themes that they're seeing in market. That's one. Two is we're always open to always talking about access to research. So for example, some investment banks offer their research portals to us. We're able to use that and have back and forth conversations. In regards to recommending banks towards for commercial transactions to our portfolio companies, we have to be very careful about that just from a regulatory point of view. So we don't really participate over there. The way that we really think about things from banks' point of view is that they are partners as part of the larger ecosystem. And so how can we collaborate? We think about sharing information to the best degree that we can, and then ensuring that if there is something to be done, that we include the right parties at the banks to participate in that as well.
Again, drop those questions into the Q&A function here. We've got just a couple of minutes left. Question here: how do you actively seek outside innovation in ways in which you want to invest in, or how do you facilitate those connections into Mayo?
Well, I'll tell you an easy one. It's seminars like this. But a little bit more than that is some, I guess, outreach efforts that we do on our own. So I'll speak at least on the corporate development side, and then Seth, please feel free to come on after that. The way we think about it is, so for example, if we have international opportunities, we actually scope out certain companies that we're interested in. We do our own market landscape, and we try to understand who are leader players in that market specific to our strategic priorities. And we actually go out there with a team of executives, and we do site visits, and we do a whole orchestrated agenda where we try to understand who are the top leaders, try to understand the landscape. And so we take proactive measures in terms of building relationships with partners that we see some possible strong collaborations to be established. So there are those type of examples.
I would just add to that our small but fierce marketing team does a lot of marketing through LinkedIn and Twitter as well. So following Mayo Clinic Ventures on those platforms would be a good way of seeing some of the technologies we have for available for licensing. The other aspect is that we engage in a lot of conferences where we're doing one-on-one networking with both investors as well as industry. We just had a delegation come back from the Bio Conference in San Diego, where I think they probably had 150 individual one-on-one meetings while they were there. So we are actively out there networking and finding these opportunities. And then in terms of bringing things in, we're exploring the capabilities that they might have that might align with the interest of researchers or physicians here at Mayo Clinic in terms of innovation.
A question here, what type of goals and objectives do you have related to elder care in that space?
In terms of elder care, I think there are, we kind of take the lead in terms of the interest of our physicians and researchers. So strategically, in terms of that, like they fit within, I think, the overall population of patients at Mayo. So it is a priority for us. But we do have innovations in, longevity and elder care that do get submitted to our office that we explore commercialization.
Going through, let's see, one question here, and maybe for Seth here. If a company wants to engage with Mayo Clinic to support an SBIR or STTR application to the National Institutes of Health, any advice on the best way to start that process?
So the best thing would be to probably look at who at Mayo Clinic might align from a research aspect with your specific proposal. Engaging them if there's interest, and then we would look to have some level of co-development or product development engagement through a know-how license agreement for them to help and assist with that. But those sort of activities have been done through our office.
Great. Okay. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap here. It's just about 11 o'clock. I do want to thank Seth and Muddassir again for a great discussion and their time to answer questions here for the last 20 minutes or so as well. Again, that is Seth Eisenman from Mayo Clinic Ventures and Muddassir Laique from Mayo Clinic Corporate Development. Again, I believe Jeanette put the business contact link in the Q&A if you want to grab it now. Otherwise, we'll make sure to include it in any kind of follow-up email and communications there as well. So gentlemen, thank you both again for your time. Our next webinar here is June 20th, 8 days from today, featuring a conversation titled Maximizing Early Stage Clinical Trial Success, Streamlining Data, Technology, and Strategy for Optimal Outcomes. So registration for that is open. Hope to see you all there. Again, this webinar has been recorded, so you'll receive a link here in the next day or so. If you'd like to rewatch or share with your colleagues, you're absolutely encouraged to do that. So with that, thank you all for attending today. Have a great morning. My name is Ben Wagner, and we'll be in touch very soon. Thank you.